This week on In the Field, waiting and how it's an integral part of landscape photography. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Davenport and welcome to In the Field. This is a series where I take you with me on one of my photo shoots, share thoughts about why I chose a certain composition, how I had the camera set up, why I may have not chose to shoot something else, and just share those experiences with you. Hopefully that will give you some ideas or some inspiration for your photography. So I'm really excited about this week's episode, and it's all about waiting. And the reason is I went to do a shoot at Sunset Cliffs, and I've been to Sunset Cliffs in San Diego lots and lots of times. But I've had this image in my head, a photo that I wanted to take for a long time. But I needed to wait until all of the different elements were going to come together. Now, Sunset Cliffs has a little bit of an access problem. It gets dicey around high tide, and so that's an issue. So I needed to have a lower tide. I wanted it at sunset, and I wanted partly cloudy skies so the sunset would be interesting. And of course, all of that needed to come together on a day that I was actually able to get down there and go shoot, because I have family and young kids, and life sometimes gets in the way of photography. But all of those things finally came together just a couple of weekends ago, and it took months waiting to get to the point of being able to make some wonderful photos. So let me show you where Sunset Cliffs is on the map, and then some footage from the shoot. Here's San Diego downtown, and the Sunset Cliffs area is all along this coastal region here, leading up into the military base and then the Cabrillo National Monument. The area that I was in, let me zoom here a little bit, so you can see here's Sunset Cliffs Boulevard, Hill Street, and then this whole park area, and there's some decent parking here, and a stairwell that goes down, a ladder, that'd be fun. Let me switch over to satellite view here. And we'll zoom in, get a little 3D going. Here we go. And as you can see, this beach is quite narrow, and the access point that I use is the stairwell here, and clambering over this area is easier at low tide than high tide, because high tide you're going to be covered up, and if it's very high tide, it's just fundamentally dangerous. There is a unsafe way to climb down this section of the cliffs, but again, the water will come all the way up to the base of the cliffs at high tide. So even this being like an escape route, it is not a good choice. But I walked up and down the whole beach here, and I ended up setting up in this area right over here. And there's some pretty interesting geometric forms that happen in the rocks. So I'm going to rotate around, and if you can imagine getting down low here, so I'm somewhere along this segment right here, and I'm framed up where you've got these sea caves here, and then the sky off in the background, a bit of ocean. And well, at this point, let me just show you the setup with the actual video from the shoot. Just arrived at the top of Sunset Cliffs. Got some pretty interesting clouds, and right now you can see that spot where this boat's going through. There's some sunlight coming through there. I am cautiously optimistic. The sun's going to get low on the horizon, going to light up the sky, and the tide is going out, so I should be able to get down to the base of the cliffs and have plenty of beach to work with. So it's time to get started. So patience has paid off for me. I have been waiting for literally months for conditions to be right. The tides to be low enough so I can walk across these rocks and get to the beach on the other side. Some interesting sky. And the tide's still rolling out, so after sunset I will not have an issue getting back across these things and up my little stairway access here. Normally most of this is covered in high tide, so patience is definitely a virtue for this shoot. So I'm working around the base of the cliffs here and trying a few compositions. These patterns in the rocks are really cool, and there's these nice little eyes of water and radial segments all fading out. I'm kind of liking having this other cliff in the background here. That means the sun will be setting over to my right shoulder, to the camera right. I'm not sure if I'm going to stay in this spot or wander around a little bit more. Tide's still going out, so there's some other cliffs on the other side to explore. One thing I did want to point out, let me check where I'm going to walk before I back up. There we go. You can see that the tripod's on very uneven ground.
And so when you're using the level in your camera, it can lie to you. It will tell you it's level, but then you look at, in this case, see the horizon there right in the photo. I had to manually line that up so it's straight. So you can't always believe the level in your camera or in your tripod. So after scrambling over these rocks and checking out the other side of the cliffs there, I liked where I was before. These cool geometric shapes in the rocks and a couple of tide pools to give me some foreground interest. I took a few test shots, and I'll show you one here straight out of the camera. Just zipped it over to my iPhone from the Sony. And really get this as the foreground with a couple of tide pools to give some interest there so there's not too much dead space. Some ocean in between. And then, the nice backdrop of the cliffs. It's about 20 to 25 minutes before sunset, and right now the horizon looks reasonably clear. There's a bit of a fog layer, but hopefully that'll be enough to let some of the light through, so it will light up these rocks, give the cliffs, a nice bathing of orange light. So cautiously optimistic for a nice outcome. It's getting close to showtime, and some light has shown up here, which is nice. I've brought it down to f16, and I'm also bracketing, you can see here, right there. I've changed the shooting mode to bracketing. I don't expect to be doing HDR with this, but I'm going to bracket as a crutch to make sure I get an exposure that I'll be able to work with in post, and who knows, maybe I'll end up blending things together. As another tip, you can see exposure compensation right now is set at 0. I had dialed that up to 2 while I was just taking random frames here to help fine-tune the composition. With a base exposure is nominal, the foreground was a little dark, and so it was a little hard to see exactly where did I position this one foreground element and this one over here in relation to the rest of the scene. So that's a little trick you can use to help compose when you've got a bit of low light. And now, as you can see, you get some shine here on the edge of the cliffs right by the water space. A couple more minutes, I'm going to hope we get some nice light, get some shots, and then climb on out of here.
I arrived at the base of the cliffs about 2 hours or so before sunset, and after scouting around and deciding exactly which composition I wanted to have when the sun did finally hit the horizon, set that up and still had about an hour or so of waiting time. So after you've waited a few months for conditions to be good, waiting one more hour, child's play, piece of cake. I won't say sad part, but the sky never lit up like I was hoping it would. There was a small gap in the clouds between what was kind of in the upper layers of the atmosphere and what was hanging around at the horizon. And so for a very brief period of time, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, there were moments where the sun peeked through with just enough, very nice orange light to hit the cliffs and hit my foreground rocks. And I was ready. The camera was there, my settings were dialed in, so it was click, click, click. And in a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, that moments were gone, but I was able to capture the photo that I wanted. So the tip of the week is to embrace the fact that waiting is part of landscape photography. There's just no getting around it. You don't roll up and in 5 minutes conditions are insane and you take the shot. Usually those are the rushed ones where you didn't get to set up in time, and so the opposite side of that coin, the planning didn't take place. But waiting is just part of the game, and sometimes you need to wait months or years for conditions to be what you want them to be. So don't be afraid of waiting, just make it part of what you do when you do landscape photography, because I don't know what the alternative is to get frustrated about it, which isn't going to do you any good at all. That's it for this week's In the Field. I hope you've enjoyed it and picked up some tips you can use on your next photo outing. If you've got questions, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me through my website. And if you like the video, share it with a friend, subscribe to the channel, share it to social media, +1 it, like it, anything to let me know that you're getting some value out of these, and that encourages me to come back and do another video and so on. So until next time, my name is Scott Davenport, and thanks very much for joining me.